Alright, we are back again on the same day with another video tying into college football. And this time, in this one, I'll be covering general developments in the sport. Now, it's been a while since I've even touched college football coverage since the national championship, admittedly. So that's tough. But, outside of transfer portal action, there have been a few other things that have ranged for quite some time, and there are a lot of news that I am missing out on and not explaining in this particular one. But there were a few over the past month that I wanted to keep in mind. So, starting out with something that did catch my eye last month. Man, because in one of the recent videos, especially pertaining to the transfer portal that I had done at that time, I am literally reviewing what North Dakota State is attempting to do in the transfer portal at that time. Talking about them as a squad, just generally talking out of my ass. And I'm saying that there is nothing that could make me think that they would ever move away from FCS football. If they did, power to them. They'd be one of the first teams, one of the more deserving teams, to move up the ranks in the situation if they so chose. But I just didn't see at the time that they were willing to make that shift. Well, it appears that I spoke on that a little too early, because just a few short days later, around like February 9th or so, you get a report that honestly took me by surprise. And that was the news that North Dakota State would officially be joining the Mountain West Conference in 2026. Now, to my knowledge, I don't believe that it's a longer term deal right now. But at the same time, what? They're going to be an FBS D1 play, something that they virtually never experienced before. Mind you, as an FCS school, they've been one of the most prolific all time. They're damn near a powerhouse in their own respects on that side of D1 football. It's just, there's no other way around that. They mentioned that they've had at least 10 FCS titles and 12 Missouri Valley Football Conference championships as well. So they're a very accomplished school as it is, especially as a football program. They have existed since 1894. And for the first time in 132 years, they're going to be exposed to FBS D1 play. That is just absolutely insane. And honestly amazing to me. I would love to expand on it more, but frankly, I'm still just in awe of it at this point. I love the move. It makes for a pretty packed conference, I should say. Things are getting very interesting over there. As they try to counter some of the realignment that's taken place over the past few years. It's a smart move for them. Of course, North Dakota State, it's not technically all the way in the deep west of the U.S., but at the same damn time, we're in the general ballpark here. So I don't think there's a logistical issue with that at all. They easily enter that conference as a great team. Just when looking at their resume compared to how they stack up, even if you want to look at a lower level of competition, if you're stacking them up against any other program in the current Mountain West Conference, they're going to be able to more than hold their own. Like, let's just get a general sense of what it looks like on the football side, because I do think that it could extend elsewhere, but I am not totally sure about that. So let's see. You get a look at I guess their standings. Let's just say, or no, their schools. Yes. Okay, so they have Air Force, of course, Boise State, Colorado College, Colorado State, Fresno State, Grand Canyon, Hawaii, Nevada, New Mexico, San Diego State, San Jose State, UNLV, Washington State, and Wyoming. You can add North Dakota State to the mix now. I guess even they're still surprised in that. How is it that I just get on here and they don't even have that on their school's database just yet? That's interesting. Like, you've got to include them at some point. The move is real, y'all. I'm just as surprised about it, but the move is real. Granted, some of those schools are probably like competing strictly in like basketball or any other particular sport. I didn't even know a Colorado college existed. Maybe that's naive thinking. Okay, so in football, it's Air Force, Hawaii, Nevada, New Mexico, North Dakota State, Northern Illinois. Yes, they also move to the Mountain West, as I'd reported in the transfer portal video. San Jose State, UNLV, UTEP, Wyoming, and that rounds it out. Boise State, for context, is also moving over to the Pac-12. Hey, stuff is going to get wild, but I'm loving it. I'm here for that. And yeah, you look at all those schools, like, it's clearly North Dakota State head and shoulders above that. Can you imagine what that does for them as a team? Reputation aside. Because usually the conversation would be like, yes, it's a prolific program, but who the fuck wants to go to North Dakota and play football? Well, now with them being in D1, true D1 FBS level play, with, being in, I guess they'd be in a group of like 6 conference. Still, though, you're going to have access to far more resources, far more TV exposure in terms of media rights, and potentially a much greater pool of players to select from. And that's just going to ramp that shit up times 10. Now, again, maybe they don't go on as much of a championship tear as they were in FCS play, but they can automatically come in and compete with some of the best teams out there. And that's not something that a lot of these teams going through realignment can say for themselves. So it's like, damn, that's going to be some fun, truly. For another move that relates to conference realignment, Sacramento State is also joining the MAC conference for 2026 and beyond. So we know that it's going to be a little longer of a term with them. Generally, their teams have been through quite the weird time. Basketball's not gone so hot for them. They just finished with a 10-31 record and aren't even going to qualify for March Madness play in college basketball. But in football, let me take a look and see what happened here. Because they honestly, if I can get a look here, they've been a recent football program. They only started in 2008. And to that point, they'd been flying under the radar for a while, naturally so. But they did have a 7-5 season last year. Now, it didn't look like they qualified for bowl play, but they did play relatively well. They got some dominant wins against Weber State, Eastern Washington, and also Portland State. A lot of those coming in the latter half of the season, but then they rounded it out with a loss to UC Davis on November 22nd last year. And so, even though that success may not always measure up compared to some of the more high-profile schools out there, for them to go to the MAC conference, same thing. Bit of a lower risk opportunity to take a chance on a school like that if you're the MAC conference, especially with losing some of your programs to the Mountain West and the Pac-12. There's a chance to retool a little bit. And Sacramento State might be decent enough to, again, help you contribute to at least keeping the conference alive. That's really what it comes down to. It's not the flashiest move out there. It's still one that surprised me. But, a lot of that just comes down to making sure you have enough to invest in to ensure that you can feasibly survive as a product. And if you don't, then you're just going to fizzle out. Mitch Barnhart, the former athletic director for Kentucky, would retire. He'd been serving for 24 years, and to be honest, in multiple realms, especially when you look at Kentucky college basketball, again, this is a college football video, but obviously they had much greater success there. And, they had to make the tough decision of moving on from John Calipari. It's been touch and go for Kentucky over the past few seasons since then, but they are contending for a potential March Madness spot in this tourney, so we'll see how it goes. In terms of college football, completely different story. Now, he's going to be held responsible for the hiring of Will Stein and the general manager that also moved on from Oregon to here with Stein in this offseason early on before the transfer portal got fully underway. He'll be held responsible for that in what would probably be one of the final moves that he's made with the program as an AD. And again, as we understand, it's still going to take some time to see that go down. But, yeah, I mean, shit. Like, literally, 66-year-old. He was the longest tenured Power 4 executive. And it's like, damn. Just like that, he is now moving on just to retire and spend quality time with those that he loves the most. You can't blame him for that decision. It's genuine. It's going to leave Kentucky scrambling for a little bit, but, with them seemingly having the right tools in place, all you're really looking for is a person who can manage well. He doesn't need to come in right away and blow the door off the roof. He just needs to make sure that every other person is doing exactly what it is that they need to be doing. From Will Stein up. Mississippi State, moving on to them, would hire Philip Montgomery as their new wide receiver coach and also assistant offensive head coach as well. And with the way that Mississippi State performed last year, it was just a mixed bag. Like, honestly, they did have some stretches last season where they looked to be competent, but they went on a massive slide, like a 5-8 record. And while their offense was somewhat competitive, their defense was more of the issue. Whenever you look at their core, though, they had solid wide receivers for days. It's just that in terms of distributing the ball around, it wasn't always the best. Brennan Thompson has now entered the NFL draft, and he was by and large the biggest contributor to this team overall. His fucking blazing fast speed, man ran a 4.26. He's just going to skate past most defenders, and they didn't do enough to keep bodies on him. And as a result, he was able to exploit those defenses. They also had Anthony Evans III and real-life Seydou Traore. This was a man that I had in fucking northern Colorado on College Football 25 with the fucking team builder. I didn't think this person was real. So to my surprise, he was, and had a solid season of 35 receptions and 369 yards and 5 touchdowns. So somewhat okay. More of their strength came with how they performed at times occasionally in some of these games with the rushing attack. So they're a team that definitely wants to establish some balance. But if they want to become more potent, I suppose they think that it is better for them to lean into their passing game a little more. And with him being a wide receiver coach, trying to acquire new talent to work with at that position, that could certainly help you out. And with the way that the offense had been performing in general, I'm not too sure on what Philip Montgomery was feeling before, but if your offense was that productive and he already served a role in that, now you have him focusing in on a couple of key aspects and becoming the full-time assistant offensive head coach. I mean, the only way you can go if you are Mississippi State is up and into bowl contention with something like that, logically speaking, right? That's the goal, and they're hoping to reach it with them. Because that's definitely a competent offense. But again, they're going to have to level that shit out. They're going to have to clean that defense up someday. At some point in time. You just have to do it. Like, there's no way you can survive constantly with that bullshit. New Mexico would hire Ryan Berryman as their full-time athletic director, as he would take over for a different person in a different Pete Thamel report that would move elsewhere, ironically enough. This kid is young, though. He's 32 years old. And, I mean, he's already taken on a massive responsibility to try to uproot as much of these different sports as possible for the University of New Mexico. Yeah, like you're bringing them up so you understand that as an overall, it's not as desirable. Now, they did have a 9-4 season in college football last year, but that doesn't mean that every single athletic team performed to a high level for them. The fact that they even got to this point could be considered a surprise to some people. And it really came more so as a result of them having one of the better defenses in the nation. They ranked in the top half with a 46 overall finish in terms of points per at 22.3. Their offense, on the other hand, let's just say that they left a little bit to be desired. You could expect a little more from them. They just weren't as consistent with getting in the end zone, really. I mean, 39 touchdowns on offense between both the quarterbacks, 5 different ones, combining for 17 touchdown passes, including a fucking linebacker and a running back, and a wide receiver. And also 22 on the ground, which probably serves to be a little more of their strength. That might be their identity. You can't knock them for that, but that's kind of ass. Still, it got them there, especially with the help of guys like both of Kayshawn James Newby leading the team with 9 sacks, and then also having that aforementioned linebacker lead all of their guys with 129 combined tackles, by far the most on the team. Seems that they may be losing those. In fact, that linebacker also, as I'm looking at this, might be the coach's son, but I digress. They did get themselves a bowl appearance and lost to Minnesota in the Rate Bowl. So they're going to be looking to at least try to recalibrate for the next season. But honestly, if New Mexico can reach that same level of success in football, they're probably not doing too much about that. I think that's a pretty good expectation for them to have. I don't think they get to a point where they're going to be competing for CFP play in deep postseason action. That's probably wishful thinking. So we're not gonna stretch it like that. I can't bring myself to do that. But yeah, in other sports as well, depending on where his expertise lies, depending on how he can truly handle operating a team, they might have the right hire. Missouri would hire Mario Moccia as the CEO for the Every True Tiger brand collective at the university. Upon hearing that, I'm like, okay, what is this name? Why the fuck are we even calling it that? And then I'm thinking to myself in real time as it showed up on the ticker again, it's like, oh, okay, this is probably a representation of all the different players participating in athletics on campus. And essentially, as I put here, it's an NIL operation. A school-imposed NIL operation. An initiative to manage it in terms of different contracts for different students. Mention, as well, when it comes to some of the deals, trying to navigate which ones may fit best for a particular student or athlete. And then also just making sure that these things, even though there are going to be some logistical requirements on their end, that they don't interfere with the ability to perform in a given sport. That's what I think that these collectives would be handling. And it's not all that different from what the House settlement last year was intending to do with, companies like Deloitte, who are still probably going to have a role in this. In fact, the collective is there so the school can have some conjoined say in what's happening. But Deloitte is probably the next place they're going to turn towards to make sure that every aspect of the contract, of the deal, is feasible and is within the legal confines of the policies implemented on it all. So it's just, in this time, you've got to have somebody, willing to take that role, and it seems like Moccia is more than willing to do so. Now, I'm sure there are going to be rough stretches with that. It's not like this is easy stuff to handle, but it's like, man, And then, after hearing that, Tuesday would give us some news, man. Because per Pete Thamel of ESPN and multiple sources all over the place, it was mentioned that Lou Holtz, the former Notre Dame coach, a legend of the sport, no matter who you ask, passed away at the age of 89 on Tuesday, unfortunately. Man, it's just between, on one of my previous videos talking about that ordeal, in, hearing that, seeing that on Tuesday as well, we are losing some college football legends, man. Maybe for completely different reasons, but it's just, with the amount of stuff that's happened there, it's oh my gosh. What is truly going on? I mean, you've heard nothing short of praise for Holtz as a coach, as a motivator, and as a person. All over, people paying their respects and tributes, honoring him, reminiscing on different moments that they had with him, sharing a few stories. Some comical ones at that he was a part of at the time. And just really speaking highly of him as a person. And anytime you have something like that happen, it's always unfortunate. But if that is the genuine outlook that you are giving these people, and they're paying it for it like that in a genuine way, you understand that at that point, he did more than his fair share of good all over the place. And promptly, living to be 89. It's a grand old age. And he was still out here operating in the same way, being that inspiration for other people, trying to coach up other players and potential coaches like Marcus Freeman, for example, filling that role at the university, and also just being his true self as a personality. There were mentions of him, on the Pat McAfee show once as a guest that they played, in the latter half of a different video in tribute of him. And I was also watching an interview that those guys did with Pete Bevacqua, the aforementioned AD, who came under his fair share of fire for how the business with Notre Dame and not making the CFP was conducted over the course of the end of last season, within the first few weeks of this year as well. Man, just a lot of good things to say generally. And the story he told about him just, using his expression of somebody having the heart of a lion for people of whom he didn't specifically know about. Like, he met Pete Bevacqua in a one-off situation and didn't really know much about him, and said that, according to Bevacqua, and, he joked that he was crushed about it, but that was Holtz's nature as a genuine person. And again, doing that as he's nearing his 90s, in his late 80s. Like, that says a lot about the genuine passion that he had for what he was doing, and also the kind of impact that he wanted to have on other people around him, no matter what. Regardless of whether or not he was familiar with you. He wanted to, he wanted to give you that energy that you needed to go out there and compete. He wanted to give you that kind of energy to where you would run through a brick wall for that man. And you can definitely say that about his overall resume. I don't want to get into it too much because, again, as a general watcher, obviously I'm hearing about Lou Holtz all the time as, again, a football legend. His resume is definitely out there. He won what is the last national championship for Notre Dame in 1988, his second or third season with the program, and he would coach there from 1986 to 1996. Just a truly accomplished individual that I, again, can't really attest, certain things to in the same ways that other people could, because they were alive. Maybe as younger kids, maybe as nearer adults, watching him go to work for that time. I was still just not in that position. I wasn't even close to that. So I can't really commentate on that too much, because those are things that other people who probably fit the bill a little better have already done a great job of doing. But when it comes to him, man, he is, again, yet another legend that will truly be missed. Man, moving on to Akron. And per a different report on Tuesday, we mentioned that they would be eligible for the football postseason in this upcoming year. Now, they were out last year because of, like, let me just make sure I got this down. There was something specific that led to this. Let me see. Yeah, they were just below, like, a specific academic standard. Tell me where you've heard that before. And as a result, they decided, oh, okay, yeah, you're gonna perform that lackluster in the classroom. All right, we're gonna have to make sure that you don't get any potential to, commit into further extracurriculars and go out to all these different places and sightsee if you can't get your ass in the classroom and perform to the same level. That's essentially what they said last year. And with them cleaning it up a little bit, with them improving it, they have now granted them that waiver. Now, it is just for this year, and we'll see if it continues to extend, but that's going to take sustained excellence. You can't just, even if we're going to give you that one, if you barely got by, ain't going to be none of that. Like, you have to consistently model that over a set number of years to finally have them decide, okay, you know what, we're not going to worry about grants. You can just play for the postseason, because now we trust that as an academic program, you guys are going to handle your business. Until they reach that point, it's just going to be the same cycle on a year-to-year basis, and I think that's totally understandable. But the bigger question is this. What makes y'all think Akron is going to the postseason? Yes, we're technically talking about bowl season, but seriously, just entertain that for a second. What would really make people believe that is what they're going to contend for? Like, it's with all due respect, it's Akron. Like, are we good? I mean, they literally went 5-7 with one of the overall worst teams in the FBS, point blank, period. Bottom half, far bottom half in offense at 108th in the nation, and definitely bottom half in defense. They didn't even come close. And they did have a person rush for over 1,000 yards, and they did have some decent wide receiver play, but again, none of that was convincing enough for them to truly get themselves even to 500. So at that point, you have all that going down already, and we're supposed to believe that they're just going to magically make the postseason? I guess that's not how that works. But then, for a different report recently, with what I believe can round it out, the NCAA is they're trying to push back as hard as they can. Now, for reference, Trinidad Chambliss obviously was a player who was pretty intriguing. You're coming from Ferris State, you're backing up Austin Simmons to start out the year, but as a result of an injury to him, he goes down early, and he substitutes in, never looking back from his starting position, and turning into one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. One of the better rising stars. For players, entering that college setting for the first time last year. And it all culminated in him remaining to be one of the better players in the overall CFP, putting on a show in those games too. It's not like he just shrunk completely in those scenarios. No, he brought the fucking energy in those games. So you have that down. But now, for him, after that season ends, it's really about trying to think about next steps. And he could enter the draft, but at the same time, with it already being a weaker class, with them having just that lone year of elite play in a D1 setting, he may not be as willing to enter the draft. And so ultimately the time comes for him to make a decision. And after a year where he passed for the most yards in the SEC, along with 22 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and 527 rushing yards, he decided to transfer. Well, he didn't decide to transfer. Rather, he tried to acquire an injunction, a waiver that would allow him to be eligible for at least the next season. With him, Chambliss has always been really good, especially when you go back to his time for Ferris State, I should say, in D2 play. And while he's definitely putting up elite numbers there was a time, I believe it was 2023, they mentioned, that he had missed time due to complete and total injury that derailed his season at that point. So there was no way that he could play. And you're thinking naturally that should take a year off of eligibility and give it back to the player. But I suppose that did not happen. And so he had to go to a completely different level to fight it. And they would make the decision at that point in February to grant him an injunction that would allow him to play for at least one more year in college football. And just like that, seemingly, after hearing about it for a while, it was case shut and debate over for Chambliss' time as Ole Miss Rebel. Only not so fast. Not on the NCAA's watch. Because, as this quote would state here, in a filing the NCAA, per ESPN, is appealing the preliminary injunction that the State Court of Mississippi granted to Ole Miss quarterback Trinidad Chambliss that paved his way to be eligible for a fifth college season in 2026. In a filing in the Mississippi Supreme Court on Thursday, the NCAA is appealing the injunction, claiming that the organization has the final decision-making authority and interpretation and application of its eligibility rules. End quote. They said, nah, you must really believe that you are going to come back and play in CFB in 2026? There's no way. You've already had your time. It's time to move on so that another Ole Miss quarterback can step up to the plate and get it done instead of having them overpay for you completely. Stuff is crazy. To break down this injunction even further, a quote from CBS Sports would say, quote, the preliminary injunction provides respondent with an additional year of eligibility, but that is available to the to other student athletes under NCAA bylaws. Under the trial's court order, Ole Miss will enjoy the benefit of rostering a star quarterback who is no longer eligible to compete. The document reads, such an outcome is unfair against two D1 schools who follow the rules and must compete against Ole Miss in the 2026-27 season, or who may be displaced for postseason opportunity by Ole Miss. That harm cannot be undone through an appellate decision that follows a final judgment on merits. End quote. Like, there might be a point to that, in a way. Yeah, this quote from that lens isn't totally wrong, especially talking about, eligibility to compete. Like, yes, that's a real thing. I understand it. And especially when injuries are not a factor and you're telling me that you have different players moving from school to school to school to still be in the same position and then move to another school, that aspect of things is just like, are we being serious right now? Like, come on, man. At the same time, if injuries are a part of the equation, because there's been a fair balance of both. Yes, there are people honestly still playing, and this was even going on in college basketball for a little bit as well before they decided to set that shit down. You have so many talented players overall. And clearly a quarterback is going to be possibly the best man on the team. Knowing how good Trinidad Chambliss is already, there is a world in which he could just easily light up the competition and mow through it like it's nothing. Like, I do find it ironic, though, for them to complain about unfair lingo and ballots. Because, again, man, that's wild. Let me see. Yeah, they had 658 pages of filing. Shit's insane. And as this quote from this ESPN article states, quote, per the filing, the NCAA argues that the Chambliss ruling cuts to the heart of fair play. The NCAA is charged with supporting its member institutions and enforcing the rules they adopt. Its even-handed enforcement of the eligibility rules is necessary to ensure a level playing field among all competitors and provide opportunities for incoming student athletes. If courts can intervene in NCAA eligibility decisions to provide special treatment to favor athletes, then the NCAA's ability to ensure fair athletic competition is through in which all participants play by the same rules will depend upon the whims of trial courts throughout the country. Dang. Like, from that standpoint, you hear that stuff and you look about it. Like, that last portion of that quote. Hey, I mean, they've gone through this countless times before to, I guess, just skew momentum at times and parlay that into other success for other players. And that can pay off for them tremendously. But if there does come times where you have to be fair and objective about things, you can't necessarily count those out either. It's all of what part of being a business comes down to at the end of the day. You have to be able to compromise in those situations. But again, they're not trying to play ball here. Not at all. Now, when it comes to the case itself, there's still, an update to be heard in terms of the overall appeal. But there is precedent for it. As this quote overall states right here, everyone remembers when the NCAA famously appealed to the Supreme Court in the Alston case and got their teeth knocked out by Justice Kavanaugh. Morris told ESPN, I expect the NCAA to be sitting chiquits in this appeal as well. The Alston case refers to a suit led by Don Austin, the former West Virginia running back, who argued that limiting benefits to players violates federal antitrust laws. So that's one example, and that is also on the college football level. But for a different example, we now have to go down to high school, because as this ESPN article from Wetzel and Thamel also stated, quote, Alright. Quote, in the Mississippi Supreme Court filing Thursday, the NCAA's chief argument centers on precedent set by the Mississippi Supreme Court that involved an eligibility decision involving the State High School Association. The NCAA cited a ruling in 2015 in Mississippi High School Activities Association Incorporated versus Hattiesburg High School. That case involved a girls basketball player who sought an injunction against the 2011 MHSAA decision that determined that she was ineligible to compete. The MHSA declared her ineligible because she transferred to Hattiesburg High fewer than 60 days before the start of the school year and thus not in accordance with its rules. So those are definitely interesting pieces of material to look at in regards to this. And only time will tell if they allow Chambliss to, still go through with it. Because an appeal, again, doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to change, but it's a cry for, I guess, support and just backing on this overall thing to make sure that they can, in fact, go about doing this in the way that they intend. But if they're willing to commit to something like this happening as low as high school, then you can imagine that some of the same things, essentially with the way that the NCAA is in terms of honestly having all these policies and saying that they should be the final authority on this without really, having the optimal policies in place for most things. Like, you can't call yourself that. And then, we constantly see that you aren't as prepared as you think for some of these results of these court cases against you. Like, that's a little interesting. But yeah, it should be something, honestly, that I think Chambliss gets done. We'll see what happens. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.